Chapter 471, Shall we compete? Lin Che put her hands on his arm. That's enough, Situ. Situ scoffed and swept his gaze around. Why, does anyone else want to kick Lin Che out of this industry? Qin Wanwan's eyes twitched and she hastily said, Sister Lin isn't really good with her words. I'm actually good friends with Lin Che. Our relationship is completely different from what you saw. Situ shifted his gaze to Qin Wanwan in front of him. He responded contemptuously, You. Lin Che's good friend. When did Lin Che have a friend as trashy as you? You want to claim connections with Lin Che and hold yourself out to be her good friend, but you're not even worthy. Qin Wanwan's face darkened. Situ Chong did not mince his words at all. He spared no thought for Qin Wanwan's feelings and even attacked her verbally in such an obvious manner. Seeing as he had done this in front of the newbies, Sister Lin refused to admit defeat. From behind him, she asked, Where did a bastard like you come from? Do you know who is standing in front of you? It's Qin Wanwan. Is an unimportant hoodlum like you even worthy of her? Situ Chong looked deranged as he looked at Qin Wanwan and said, You're right. I don't know who this person is. Because I've never had to know someone who isn't worthy of being known by me. As they looked at this ridiculously arrogant man, they were momentarily at a loss for words. Situ Chong turned to Lin Che and said, Lin Che, let's go. Lin Che looked at them and was secretly amused. She was even more amused when she saw how Sister Lin was glaring and how speechless she was. Situ Chong walked straight ahead and Lin Che trailed behind him while smiling. Sister Lin gritted her teeth angrily. Who do you think you are? We're not the least bit interested in making your acquaintance. However, just then, a newbie behind them simply said, Ha, I know. That's Situ Chong. That day, someone saw Situ Chong pick up Lin Che from the entrance. Situ Chong. Sister Lin's and Qin Wanwan's eyes flashed. Instantly, the newbies began to discuss amongst themselves in excitement. They looked at Sister Lin and Qin Wanwan in amusement. It was true that a mere Qin Wanwan was worth nothing in Situ Chong's eyes. Earlier, Situ Chong's words had been tremendously audacious. He had said that he did not know Qin Wanwan, that Qin Wanwan was not worthy of his acquaintance, and that Qin Wanwan could only dream of being associated with Lin Che. In retrospect, his words had really been like one slap after another, each landing directly on Qin Wanwan's face. Qin Wanwan's face nearly contorted from anger when she saw the mocking expressions on the newbies' faces. Thus, she quickly gave an excuse and sneaked off with Sister Lin in tow. Lin Che looked at Situ Chong. Amused, she turned around to look inside before saying to Situ Chong, You were really too arrogant just now. Situ Chong asked, Why? Was I wrong? Why did you behave like that too? A top socialite like you. Hey. Stop saying that I'm a top socialite. That was just a joke. That's not a joke. If you're the top socialite, you're the top socialite. That's a different field. Here, I still want to take acting seriously. By the way, why are you here? She said while looking at Situ Chong. Situ Chong pulled her out. If you're free, let's go fence together. Lin Che looked at Situ Chong and recalled Butler Chen's words. She instinctively asked, Why did you suddenly think of fencing? Situ Chong asked, Why are you asking me this out of the blue? Butler Chen told me that before this, you refused to ever fence again. Situ Chong's expression fell slowly. He glanced at Lin Che before turning his head away again. What if I told you that you've given me inspiration? You've shown me that working hard at something is really worth it. I feel that I've let myself languish for too long. So no matter what I do, as long as I work hard at it, I'm bound to get good results. That's precisely what sportsmanship is. It's like that for fencing, and it's the same for my family's business. Even if I can't fence anymore, I can still continue the spirit of fencing elsewhere. He said, Fencing is a gentleman's sport. You stop once you get a point. Whether you win or lose is decided entirely based on the competition. I can do the same in the business world. His words stirred many thoughts in Lin Che's mind. However, she looked at Situ Chong and asked, How could I possibly have given you so much inspiration? But I'm very happy that you're able to get back on your feet. Situ Chong looked at Lin Che unwaveringly before taking a step towards her. It was only a step, but suddenly, he seemed to be much closer to her. Lin Che froze. She looked at him and did not know what to say. But just then, a car abruptly swerved across the street and rushed straight towards them. The earth-shattering sound it emitted inevitably turned some heads. Lin Che turned her head around in astonishment. Like an illusion, she saw the black car heading straight for them before swerving at a beautiful angle and stopping in front of them in a very dashing manner. Lin Che thought the car looked a little familiar. The next moment, she remembered that the car belonged to the Gu family. It was one of the cars in Gu Jingze's fleet of luxury cars. As she expected, the door of the car opened and Gu Jingze climbed out. His large and tall and figure stepped out before he pushed the door shut in a cool manner. His movements were seamless and extraordinarily natural. Lin Che wondered why he had suddenly come. Gu Jingze, you. But Gu Jingze merely glanced meaningfully at Lin Che. Then, he looked beside him at Situ Chong. It was strange to Lin Che that the two of them seemed to already know each other. She had initially thought that they were not acquainted with one another. The two of them were of similar height. Gu Jingze was larger in size, which made Situ Chong appear slightly smaller. Situ Chong had a gentler disposition, attributable perhaps to the fact that he had stayed at home for too long. On the other hand, Gu Jingze was gloomy and frightening in his indifferent state. As each of them looked the other in the eye, at the side, Lin Che's mind was in a mess. What were they about to do? She hoped that they were not about to get into a fight. However, Gu Jingze was the first to speak. I heard that you're a good fencer. That's right, Situ Chong said. Beside them, Lin Che got anxious when she saw their unyielding gazes at one another. Gu Jingze said, coincidentally, I've also learned how to fence before. Really, you're a man of many talents. How impressive. How about we compete? No way, what were they planning to do? Lin Che asked frantically, compete? Stop messing around. Why should the two of you compete? However, it seemed that neither of them had heard Lin Che's words. They merely continued to gaze at one another. Situ Chong said, fine. Let's compete since you said so. But how should we go about it? Isn't that Q University over there? We can go there and compete. That's great, but I'm just worried that there may be too many people at Q University. If we went there and you lost, it wouldn't be good. Gu Jingze scoffed. It doesn't matter to me. But I'm afraid that your reputation as a champion may be ruined today if you lose to me. That's just an empty title. I don't care. Then, what are we waiting for? Let's go. No way. Were they really going to compete? Lin Che looked at the incomparably serious expressions on their faces. Her thoughts truly got even more jumbled up. Chapter 472. It seems like they're about to have a showdown. Situ Chong said, all right. We'll meet in Q University's training room an hour from now. Give me some time to prepare, all right. Gu Jingze said, all right. See you in an hour. After speaking, Situ Chong turned to look at Lin Che. Will you come later to cheer me on? Lin Che merely looked at him in surprise as she wondered what he was up to. Situ, don't be like this. Why do you two have to compete? However, before she had even finished speaking, Gu Jingze had already pulled her away. Situ looked at Gu Jingze before saying to Lin Che, don't worry. I won't hurt him. Fencing is a gentleman's sport. We'll stop once we get a point. Gu Jingze looked on with indifference. Lin Che raised her head in disbelief. Gu Jingze, stop messing around, all right. You're being so immature. Gu Jingze looked straight ahead in nonchalance. Why, are you afraid that I'll hurt Situ? But they say that swords and knives know no mercy. We'll see what happens when the time comes. Situ sneered. I'm really looking forward to competing with you. By the time he said his last word, he had already started walking away. He left Lin Che and Gu Jingze behind. Lin Che lifted her head. Gu Jingze, you. Gu Jingze looked like he could not be bothered to say anything more to her. He scoffed before striding out. Lin Che went after him in a haste. You've really misunderstood my relationship with Situ Chong. Stop messing around, all right. It's terrible that this situation has escalated to this point. Gu Jingze merely maintained his silence and continued walking forward. As Lin Che stood there, she blinked and thought to herself, why were these men suddenly behaving like immature schoolchildren? However, Gu Jingze's attitude of indifference towards her really infuriated her. Forget it, she would let them do whatever they wanted to do. Lin Che could only rest her forehead on her hand and watch Gu Jingze leave to prepare as well. She quickly called Yu Minmin and told her that she would probably be going to Q University later. Coincidentally, Yu Minmin's meeting had just ended. She was extremely surprised when she heard Lin Che's words. Some time passed before she said to Lin Che, "Are they going to have a showdown?" "Get lost. What showdown?" Lin Che asked in disbelief. "A competition to vie for you." "What nonsense are you spouting? There's really nothing going on between me and Situ." "You think it's nothing, but Gu Jingze probably feels threatened." "But I'll go over later to take a look. Be careful not to get recognized by the students at Q University. If you cause an uproar among the students, I definitely won't be able to save you." Lin Che was pretty well known right now. She could no longer walk the streets in the open. As she looked around the bustling Q University, she had no choice but to look for a place to disguise herself. Q University was the best university in B City. The campus was also alarmingly huge. There were internal shuttle buses making their rounds around campus and many people were traveling on their electric scooters. Since it was a prominent university, the students here not only looked like top students but they also had a liberated and positive energy about them. It only took a while for people to spread the news that several luxury cars had just entered Q University's campus and had headed straight for the gymnasium at the side. The gymnasium was huge. It had been the venue for national sporting events before and was fully equipped with modern facilities. "I just found out earlier that Gu Jingze and Situ Chong are going to have a fencing competition. People from the Gu family and the Situ family have already made their way there." "Wow, in that case, can we go and watch?" "I guess so. I didn't see any blockades inside." "Good lord, why did they think of having a competition in our school? We're really lucky. Let's go and save ourselves some seats." Lin Che heard this the moment she entered. She looked on in disbelief as several girls and boys walked straight to the gymnasium. Then, she wordlessly sighed inside. Those two men were really two. Lin Che was wearing a cap, a pair of sunglasses, and a casual set of sportswear. Although she looked slightly different from the rest, she did not particularly stand out in this school since the general atmosphere was a completely liberating one. Besides, everyone's attention was on the competition happening inside, so no one took notice of her. Lin Che successfully entered the gymnasium. Sure enough, she saw the Gu family's bodyguards watching the match inside. The luxury cars parked outside were actually reserved for special use by the Gu family's bodyguards. Every single car was a multi-purpose vehicle that cost millions. The car that Gu Jingze usually drove was not amongst them. It seemed that he had yet to arrive. Once she made her way inside, she saw that the gymnasium was filled to its capacity. Everyone was brimming with anticipation as they looked towards the center. In an hour, the fencing piste had been cleaned to look brand new. The lights were already on. Only the two protagonists were missing now. Lin Che had brought Yu Minmin together with her. Yu Minmin had also disguised herself a little. She looked around and said to Lin Che, "There are so many people. Are they all here to watch Gu Jingze and Situ Chong?" "They probably are. Wow, it looks like Gu Jingze's appeal is massive. But Gu Jingze never told anyone about it. How did they?" "Everyone outside is wearing the Gu family crest. One look and anyone would know that they're Gu Jingze's subordinates. Everyone has probably already guessed that Gu Jingze would come. I guess, but there are no seats left." Yu Minmin pulled Lin Che to the front and said, "Let's look for front row seats so that we'll be able to see more clearly." "Hey, so you really came to watch the fun?" "Of course. A scene like this is a rare sight, you know." Lin Che said, "There aren't even any seats at the back. How can there be seats at the front? You probably don't understand what I'm doing." She turned around and removed Lin Che's sunglasses. "Hey, what are you doing?" Lin Che let out a cry. Then, without hesitation, Yu Minmin tapped the two boys sitting in front. She smiled and said, "Fellow students, can you give up your seats for us? Otherwise, we'll have to stand here and watch the match. While saying this, she immediately pushed Lin Che towards them. When Lin Che saw the two boys looking at her, she was like a duck driven onto a perch. She could only smile awkwardly at them. However, this smile served its purpose adequately. The two boys stared blankly at Lin Che. Although Q University had its fair share of beautiful girls, they had never seen such a beautiful woman. For a moment, they thought that she looked familiar. Before they could react, Yu Minmin hushed them and said, "We came here in secret. Please don't make a fuss." The two boys looked at Lin Che dumbly and nodded frantically. Then, they gave up their seats and said, "Have a seat. You guys should sit. We're fine standing." Yu Minmin smiled and said, "We're really grateful to the two of you." As they watched the two women sit down, the two boys looked on happily. They did not leave and continued to watch from the side. Their faces were completely red. Lin Che was truly astounded. She patted Yu Minmin and said, "There's no manager who gets her artist into trouble as you do. I just made fair use of you. Alright, quick, look, isn't Gu Jingze here?" It was about time for them to fulfill their promise to meet an hour later. People in front suddenly cried out in surprise. The person who was walking in was not Gu Jingze but Situ Chong. He was dressed in white fencing attire with his helmet secured under his arm. When he walked in, he swept his gaze around the people who had come to watch the match. Because he had often participated in competitions, the sight was extremely familiar to him. He would not be affected at all by the crowd. Chapter 473, Gu Jingze is really a professional at everything. As everyone looked at Situ Chong, who was dressed in white from head to toe, they felt that he was ridiculously handsome. Wow, it's Situ Chong. We haven't seen him dressed like this for so many years. In the past, whenever he had a match, the venue would be filled to the brim with people. I never thought that we would be able to watch him compete today. He hasn't changed at all. He's still as handsome as ever. With everyone's cheers, the atmosphere instantly heated up even more. But then, in similarly dressed fencing attire, Gu Jingze walked out. He held a mask in one hand and an epee in the other. With one person on the left and one person on the right, he and Situ Chong stood facing each other. Everyone present went into a frenzy. Good lord, it's Gu Jingze. It's Gu Jingze in the flesh. He's so handsome. How can Gu Jingze be so handsome? Good gracious, it's the first time I've seen him dressed like this. He looks exactly like a prince. The knickers wrapped tightly around his legs looked like knightly attire. Gu Jingze's figure was already tall and upright. The knickers made him look even more slender and clearly accentuated his high waist. Gu Jingze's bodily proportions were simply great. His legs were particularly long. Yu Minmin covered her ears to block out the explosive noise. She said to Lin Che, "Good lord. These young'uns are too good at shouting." Lin Che could not be bothered with such exclamations. She merely looked at the two people down below in slight worry. They were really going to have a match. Seriously, what exactly are they up to? They're having a match just because they said they would. Really, they're too immature. Why, haven't you heard this saying? What saying? If you have money, you can do whatever you want. It describes them perfectly. Alright then. Gu Jingze put on the electric foil jacket and looked at Situ Chong across him. Situ Chong returned the gaze. You've already attracted so many people here. You're really not afraid of losing, are you? Situ Chong said. Gu Jingze did not know why there were so many people here either. Nevertheless, he did not really care. At this moment, he could see nothing but Situ Chong, and the only thing on his mind was the competition between them. If you're afraid, I can have a private match with you, he said. Situ Chong smiled. Everyone says that I'm egotistical. I didn't expect you to be even more arrogant than me. Gu Jingze said, "No, I've never been arrogant. I've always preferred to take action directly as opposed to merely using words." Fine. Without further ado, let's begin. Let's begin. The two of them finally stepped onto the piece that was smack in the middle of the gymnasium. The people above seemed like they were about to rush towards the center. The girls were not at all reserved and continued shouting and cheering. The scene was truly more frenzied than that at any concert Lin Che had ever seen. Lin Che did not know why she involuntarily felt anxious as she looked at the two people standing there. Did Gu Jingze know how to fence? She never knew that he could fence. However, a prodigal genius like Gu Jingze was good at so many things, some of which she was indeed not aware of. But when Lin Che looked at the two of them right now, she really did not know what to do. She kept wondering how good of a fencer Gu Jingze was and whether he was a brilliant one. Even though she did not know who was the better fencer, she knew that Situ Chong was a professional. Thus, he had to be a formidable fencer. In that case, would Gu Jingze lose? She did not want Gu Jingze to lose. She did not at all want him to lose. Her heart would ache if anything remotely bad happened to Gu Jingze. However, if Situ Chong lost, would he lose all hope again? Lin Che did not want that to happen either. Caught in a dilemma, she clasped her hands together as she sat there. She wondered irritably to herself why they had to insist on having a match. Furthermore, when these men got stubborn, they didn't listen to a single word of advice. It made her feel even more frustrated. The noise on the piece jolted Lin Che out of her nonsensical thoughts. Whether she wanted it or not, the match had already begun. Gu Jingze's épée darted forwards. Although she was no professional, Lin Che recalled what Situ Chong had once said, the best defense was an attack. Gu Jingze was probably putting these words into action right now. Lin Che had never seen Gu Jingze fence before. However, Lin Che could tell from his very first move that his movements were precise and his figure ramrod straight. He was definitely comparable to a professional. When Lin Che saw this, she immediately understood. Gu Jingze knew how to fence. There was no doubt that he was Gu Jingze. He was immensely good at everything. His perfectionistic attitude molded him into such an attractive Gu Jingze. Meanwhile, Situ Chong did not lack in comparison at all. Their movements were equally swift. Although laypersons could not tell who exactly was the better fencer, they would not forget this scene for the rest of their lives. Naturally, everyone could easily watch a professional fencing match. However, it was certainly not easy to catch such an exciting match between Gu Jingze and Situ Chong. The spectators continued to cheer and shout as they looked at the two people on the piste. It was difficult to tell who would win because their scores were so close. Instantly, Lin Che became even more troubled. She looked at the score and felt that she would be very upset and very worried no matter who lost. She was at a loss as to what to do. However, the spectators had already split themselves into two sides of their own accord. One side was shouting, "Gu Jingze, you're so handsome and all the best." The other side was shouting, "Young Master Chong, you're doing great. You must win." Yu Minmin's eyes were fixed on the match. She merely came to watch the fun and did not care who would win and who would lose. Right now, as she was watching the match, she could not help but say, "I didn't know that Gu Jingze was so good at fencing." She raised her head to look at Lin Che. But he's too vicious. Look at him being so aggressive all the time. I think he's definitely treating the sword in his hand as a chopper. He's wishing that he could hack Situ Chong to death one hit at a time. Lin Che glared fiercely at Yu Minmin. Just then, on the piste, Gu Jingze launched another attack. Situ Chong turned his body and avoided the hit. Then, he turned his arm and made a sudden thrust. Gu Jingze dodged swiftly and easily blocked his épée. Gu Jingze made another speedy attack. Situ Chong retreated and was nearly forced all the way to the back. Just when everyone thought that he was about to lose, he suddenly dodged and quickly attacked again. With this, he immediately turned the tables. The people who had been shouting were so nervous that they did not even dare to let out a breath. It was because the score was about to hit 45 points. The match would end when someone obtained 45 points. The last few attacks were truly crucial. Gu Jingze extended his épée yet again. Situ Chong dodged it at lightning speed. The crowd drew in a breath. People who knew the sport were discussing the match. This is certainly comparable to a professional match. I didn't expect Gu Jingze to be so brilliant. They had initially come here with the intention to watch the excitement. However, they did not expect the match to be so exciting. These wealthy men probably learn everything. After all, they have the money to learn whatever they want to learn. What do you know? It's certainly not easy to learn it so well as he did. Gu Jingze either trained really hard or has a natural flair for it. At this moment, the score turned even again. It was time for the last match. The person who got the last point would be the winner. Chapter 474, I'll definitely punish you if you dare to mention him again. But at this exact moment, the floor under Situ Chong's feet suddenly caved in. He jumped away from that part of the floor. However, the floor rumbled before it collapsed completely. The two of them sank downwards together. The crowd went into a state of alarm and everyone stood up immediately. They did not know why such a thing had suddenly happened. The bodyguards at the side rushed forward in an instant. Even the referee was stuck under the rubble. However, no one was concerned about him at the moment. Gu Jingze was the first to clear the rubble and jump out. Lin Che had already run down long ago with Yu Minmin in tow. Others wanted to go down but were stopped from going any further. After going down, Lin Che hastily said, "It's me, it's me. Let me through." When the bodyguards saw Lin Che and Yu Minmin, they quickly moved aside to give the two of them some space. Everyone else could only watch the two of them enter. They continued to look on in confusion. When Lin Che reached the piste, Gu Jingze and Situ Chong had already jumped out of the rubble. Lin Che looked at their dusty and dirty appearance. After looking them over, she quickly ran to Gu Jingze. "Are you all right?" When Lin Che came to Gu Jingze's side, the corners of his lips twitched as if in satisfaction. Lin Che looked at Gu Jingze worriedly. She pulled him towards her and scrutinized his body carefully. Fortunately, his fencing attire had a protective effect, so his body was likely unharmed. However, Lin Che still caught a glimpse of his bleeding wrist. "Oh my god, Gu Jingze. You're injured." She lifted his hand towards her and saw that the wound on his wrist was completely covered in blood. The blood had already stained his white clothing. However, there was only a small amount of blood coming from the wound as it was not a large one. Nevertheless, the wound was very dirty due to the soil covering it. Lin Che quickly said, "Quick, let's leave this place. We shouldn't stay here any longer." Seeing as he was all right, Lin Che turned around to look at Situ Chong. The staff from the Situ family were already looking after Situ Chong. However, before Lin Che could make her way over, Gu Jingze had forcefully pulled her out. "Hey Minmin, do me a favor and check on Situ." Yu Minmin stood there speechlessly and had no choice but to agree. Lin Che and Gu Jingze left the others to clear the mess and went to the changing room. The doctor came over in a hurry to examine Gu Jingze's wound. He had probably been injured when he fell downwards. The doctor gave him a tetanus shot and disinfected the wound. Lin Che was standing at the side and watching the doctor bandage the wound when Gu Jingze suddenly looked up and said, "Let her do it." Lin Che froze. When she registered what was happening, she looked at Gu Jingze and asked, "What do you want?" Gu Jingze looked at her. "I'm not used to letting strangers touch me." "All right then." Lin Che could only glare at him. She bent down to bandage Gu Jingze's wound. Gu Jingze was behaving like a lofty emperor. Lin Che pursed her lips and intentionally pulled the bandages tight around his arm. Naturally, he felt a sudden pain. Tisk, he glared at this lass. Even now, she dared to play dirty tricks on him. "Lin Che, do you want to die?" he shouted. Lin Che lifted her head. What makes you think that? If not, what are you doing?" I'm bandaging your wound. You were the one who wanted me to do it." Gu Jingze thought, whose fault was it that things had turned out this way? How dare she treat him so violently? Lin Che said, "You were the one who wanted to compete for no reason. It's your fault that you fell, humph." Gu Jingze stared at her. "Whose fault did you say it was?" If Lin Che said another word, he would definitely pull her straight into his lap and slap her butt until she shouted. However, just then, Qin Hao came in. He looked at the two of them and hastily said, "Sir, it seems that the floor collapsed because the gymnasium hasn't been serviced for a long time. The rainy season is coming up, so the air has been very humid. The floor became unstable as a result." Gu Jingze nodded and gestured at him to leave. Lin Che looked at Gu Jingze. Fortunately, nothing happened. Gu Jingze glared at her. Lin Che had finished bandaging his wound. Gu Jingze said, "Yes, we were lucky. Lucky that the floor collapsed. Otherwise, Situ Chong would have lost to me today. If things turned out that way, you would have also been ashamed as a student of the Situ family." Lin Che said in disbelief, "The outcome isn't certain until the match ends." Hearing this, Gu Jingze's eyes paused. "What do you mean? Why, did you want Situ Chong to win?" No, that's not what I mean. Both of you were great, extremely great, much better than me." Lin Che quickly looked at Gu Jingze with an expression of flattery. "I didn't even know that you knew how to fence. Why didn't you tell me about it sooner? I could have just learned it from you." Her words sounded pleasant to Gu Jingze's ears. Gu Jingze said, "It's true that I know how to fence. But I'm not as good at coaching as Situ is. Although he's arrogant, he has nevertheless been training as a fencing athlete for many years. It was definitely better for him to teach you than for me to do it. Furthermore," he looked at Lin Che. "If he coached her, he would have definitely been reluctant to give her too much training." "Furthermore, what?" "Furthermore, you're so stupid. I'm worried that teaching you will make me so angry that I'll get a stroke, just like when I taught you how to drive." "Get lost." Lin Che thought to herself that as expected, Gu Jingze had nothing nice to say. However, Gu Jingze had indeed been very handsome today. He had been so handsome that all the girls in the gymnasium had nearly gone mad. Lin Che said, "Why did you learn so many things for no reason? Fencing isn't useful at all, but you actually learned it. Fencing is a sport for gentlemen, so we learned a little since we were young." "In that case, how long did you learn it for?" "I learned it for 5 to 6 years. But I haven't practiced it in years." He had not practiced it in years but still put up such a good fight. Lin Che recalled the students' discussion in the gymnasium. They had said that his skills were either a result of his hard work or his natural talent. However, given that Gu Jingze was so busy every day, it was impossible that he had the time to train hard. She knew that he was a natural. Lin Che pursed her lips and thought to herself that living together with a prodigy was really damaging to her self-esteem all the time. When Lin Che remembered that she had not taken a look at Situ, she stood up and said, "I'll go take a look at Situ's condition first." However, the moment she stood up, Gu Jingze's face had already darkened completely. He pulled Lin Che directly into his embrace. She fell into his lap and raised her head to see Gu Jingze staring at her. She asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm just going to take a look." Gu Jingze held her lip between his teeth angrily. As if to punish her, he brought her lips to the corner of his mouth and bit down hard. Lin Che whined and felt extreme pain from being bitten. "Gu Jingze, it hurts. Are you still going to take a look at him?" Gu Jingze's voice rang in her ear. Lin Che said, "I'm just going to see if he's injured." Feeling moody, Gu Jingze scoffed and proceeded to bite her neck. Ignoring her protests, Gu Jingze left a chain of marks that looked like plum blossoms on the most obvious part of her pale neck. Lin Che's neck tingled from being bitten. She held onto him while shouting, "Gu Jingze! Gu Jingze! Don't do it, don't be like this." However, her voice only further awakened the evil lurking inside him. He used his teeth to pull her collar open a little. Then, he similarly left a chain of marks on her chest. Finally, he bit the sensitive area on her chest. "Oh," she called out and hugged him even tighter. Gu Jingze, his kisses were magical and extraordinarily skilled. Each kiss made her feel as if she was dreaming. Chapter 475, I just don't want any other man to be around you. When he released Lin Che, her lips were moist and she looked disheveled even though nothing had in fact happened. Gazing at her, Gu Jingze thought to himself that this should teach her not to go and visit Situ Chong. The moment Lin Che got onto her feet, she felt that something was wrong. She looked down only to see that her chest. "Gu Jingze, you." Gu Jingze chuckled and stood up as if nothing had ever happened. He touched his wrist and went in to change his clothes. Lin Che merely stomped her foot behind him. "Gu Jingze, you wait." However, she definitely could not visit Situ Chong in this state. Right now, she did not even want to go outside anymore. Anyone would speculate upon seeing the marks on her body. She was left with no choice but to call Yu Minmin as she leaned against the wall. Yu Minmin said, "Don't worry. Situ Chong is fine, he just has a few small abrasions. How about Gu Jingze? He's fine too, but I won't be able to take a look at Situ's condition. Do me a favor and visit him on my behalf." "No problem, I'll do it for you. Just go and coax your husband properly." She did not want to coax him. Lin Che looked down gloomily at her body. She could only scold him in her mind. This two-faced demon, he was too evil, he must have done this to her on purpose. News of the fencing match between Gu Jingze and Situ Chong elicited a huge reaction in their circle. No one knew why the two of them had suddenly wanted to compete. But everyone was lamenting the fact that there had yet to be a winner. Nevertheless, no matter who won and who lost, everyone already knew that Gu Jingze indeed lived up to his reputation as a formidable and enigmatic man. There was nothing that could stump him. Lin Che returned home. When Situ arrived at his house, he called Lin Che and asked, "There's nothing wrong on your end, right?" Lin Che nodded and said, "Everything is fine. Why are you still worrying about me? How about you?" Situ Chong said, "I don't feel well at all because I didn't win against him in the end." "Hey, I'm asking you about your injuries." "Me, I'm fine, thanks for your concern." Before Lin Che could even end the conversation, someone snatched the phone from her hand. Of course, Gu Jingze was bothering her again. Lin Che quickly tried to get her phone back from Gu Jingze. "Gu Jingze, what are you doing? Give it back to me." With her phone in hand, Gu Jingze ended the call first before moving elsewhere to delete his number. Seeing this, Lin Che got anxious. "Gu Jingze, what are you doing? You can't delete my contacts." Lin Che jumped in to try to take her phone back, but Gu Jingze had always been tall. The moment he raised his hand, she could forget about snatching her phone. She could only continue looking at Gu Jingze. "Gu Jingze, you. Just you wait." Without hesitation, Gu Jingze first blocked the number before deleting it. He only threw Lin Che's phone directly to her after doing this. When Lin Che caught her phone and looked at it, the contact was gone. She said furiously, "Gu Jingze, you're way too overbearing." Gu Jingze sat down with a dignified air. He flipped a book open and said, "No problem. It's my responsibility as your husband." "What?" Lin Che said, "I've told you that there's nothing between me and Situ Chong. Do you think everyone is as coveted by women as you are, to the point that there's one at every turn?" Gu Jingze looked at Lin Che. She was so confident that no one would be interested in her. He said, "You fool. No man would be nice to a woman for no reason." "Why not? You have to trust that there are still good people in this world, you know." Lin Che said. Gu Jingze said, "If a man treats a woman well, he can only be thinking of one thing, that he wants that woman. There's nothing else that can explain it." Lin Che looked at Gu Jingze. But you're really good to me too." Gu Jingze leaned in closer and looked at Lin Che. "That's right, so it means that I want you." Lin Che pushed him aside immediately. However, Gu Jingze nevertheless went closer and pushed Lin Che down. Having seen the two of them quarreling earlier, the maids had already tactfully left. Even if something happened, they would be able to ring any of the bells that were all around the house. Gu Jingze was pressing Lin Che's entire body against the couch. Then, Lin Che heard him say, "You're not allowed to get close to any man, no matter who it is." Why are you such a hypocrite? This world is made up of only men and women. You don't want me to get close to any man, it's not really possible. No matter what, I won't allow that. He tugged roughly at her clothes. It would make me angry. Then, what if we're just friends? I won't allow it even if you're just friends. Then, how about as co-workers? I won't allow that either. Hey, how is that possible? Lin Che protested. Gu Jingze looked at Lin Che through lidded eyes. He knew that it was impossible. As she had said, there were only men and women in this world. It was impossible for her to work and interact only with women. However, what could he do? If he saw any man approach her right now, he would just think that that man had ulterior motives. There's no other option. Whatever the case, I get angry whenever I see it happen. I can't help it either. Lin Che's heart thumped under his deep gaze. Her heart also softened considerably. No matter what, he was just jealous. No matter what explanation he gave, she also understood that he was simply jealous. When she thought about it this way, she was no longer unhappy. She merely looked at him with her lips pursed. Unknowingly, she had already wrapped her legs around his waist. However, at this moment, Lin Che's phone began to ring. Gu Jingze frowned and felt completely disappointed. Lin Che quickly stood up and said, "Wait, where's my phone? I have to pick up the call." Gu Jingze took a look at her phone. It was Yang Lingxin. With a slightly angry expression on his face, he handed Lin Che's phone to her unhappily. While Lin Che was answering the call, he gently hugged her from behind. "Little Shin, what's up? Sister Shuai will be missing one of the promotional events for the film. They're asking if we can replace her. Sister Che, do you think you can make it?" Lin Che checked her schedule and said, "All right. I can make it." Quote. Everyone had a part to play in promoting the movie. It was entirely unobjectionable for her to replace someone who could not make it. It was soon time for Lin Che to participate in the program. Yang Lingxin went along with her. Because Lin Che was here on sudden notice, while she was backstage, she quickly scanned the questions that would be asked later. Yang Lingxin said, "Sister Yu hasn't been able to come to work recently, so she handed some matters over to me. Sister Che, I don't have much experience, so if I do anything wrong, be sure to tell me." "Don't worry, you're doing very well. I'll assist you." "Thank you, Sister Che. If not for this chance that you've given me, I wouldn't be able to learn so much either." "It's nothing. Everyone starts at the bottom." Lin Che was talking when she felt a sudden pain in her stomach. Yang Lingxin asked, "Do you need to use the toilet? Why don't I go with you?" All right." The two of them went to the toilet together while the Gu family's bodyguards waited outside. Yang Lingxin was still saying, "I thought that a manager only had to settle logistics. But it turns out that there are so many things to be done. It's such a difficult job and a complicated one at that. I really have to work hard to learn the ropes." However, at this moment, suddenly, Lin Che felt something black cover her head directly. Ah. Chapter 476. You took away all that I had so easily. Lin Che was in the toilet washing her hands when her world suddenly turned to black. Thereafter, she lost consciousness. When she woke up, she still felt as if she was swaying. She felt weak and had no strength in her body. She seemed to be in a car that was currently moving. She squinted and tried her best to see clearly what was in front of her. However, all she saw was darkness. She realized that she was probably in the trunk of the car. She did not know how much time had passed before she was let out of the trunk. She was led into a dark house and thrown onto the floor. When she lifted her head, she saw that she seemed to be in a basement. She frantically looked around her. Beside her, Yang Lingxin was unconscious. Lin Che quickly reached out to pat Yang Lingxin. Little Shin, quick, wake up, wake up." Little Shin opened her eyes in a daze. After regaining consciousness, she was so frightened that she immediately shrank against Lin Che's side. "Sister Che, where are we? What is this place?" Lin Che hugged Yang Lingxin. "I don't know either. Weren't we in the toilet earlier then someone suddenly came up behind us?" Yes, that was also the last thing Lin Che remembered. Yang Lingxin suddenly jerked. "Oh my god, do you think we've been kidnapped? Do you think someone kidnapped us? Sister Che, could it be some perverted fan of yours?" Lin Che shook her head. Was it a perverted fan? That was impossible. A perverted fan could not take her away under the noses of Gu Jingze's bodyguards. It had to be someone with sufficient ability and power. Just then, the sounds outside answered their doubts. "Did you bring her?" A familiar female voice made Lin Che freeze. "We've brought her here, miss. But there are two women inside. We didn't know which one you wanted, so we brought both of them here." "What? There are two women. Then, someone pushed open the door. The person who entered was none other than Lin Che. She looked much thinner and much more worn out. Lin Che was shocked. It had only been a short time since they last saw one another. How could she have become so emaciated within such a short time? Upon seeing Lin Che, young Lingxin shrank even more behind Lin Che. Lin Che sneered and said, "Lin Che, oh Lin Che. You still ended up in my hands." Lin Che looked at Lin Che in astonishment. "Are you the one who kidnapped me? Lin Che, are you sick in the head?" Lin Che said, "Yes. As long as you're alive, I'll feel gloomy each day. I won't be able to stomach any food and I won't be able to sleep. The only thing I want is to see you die. Tell me, is there any way to resolve this problem?" Behind Lin Che, there were several burly men who did not seem to be from C Nation. They looked like Indians or something as their skin color was on the darker side. Lin Che bent down to look at Lin Che. Because she had been kidnapped all the way here, Lin Che was in an extremely disheveled state and her face looked filthy too. Lin Che looked down and patted Lin Che's face. Smiling, she said, "Do you know how much I went through just to bring you here? Gu Jingze's subordinates are so difficult to shake off. You probably don't know this, but ever since the first day you left the WW banquet, I've wanted to take you here for some fun. Today, I finally got the chance to do it." Lin Che did not know what exactly she had done to escape detection by Gu Jingze's bodyguards. But when she had gone to the washroom, the bodyguards could not follow her in since they were all men. Perhaps Lin Che's subordinates had used this opportunity to take her away. In any case, it was useless now for her to think about how they had done it. Right now, she just wanted to know what exactly Lin Che wanted to do. Lin Che looked at her face before shifting her gaze to young Lingxin beside her. No wonder these people did not know who to kidnap. Apart from the fact that young Lingxin was much less attractive than Lin Che, the way she was dressed was similar to Lin Che. They were both sluts. Lin Che scoffed. While looking at Lin Che's face, she wiped her hands in distaste. "How dirty. I really don't understand what exactly is wrong with all those men. How could they possibly take a fancy to a woman like you?" Lin Che looked at her in disbelief. "You kidnapped me just because those men showered attention on me?" "No." Lin Che stared unyieldingly at Lin Che. "It's because you took away everything that I had, Lin Che. The man I like, my family, my title as the top socialite, my position, my status. You snatched everything away from me. And now you're asking me what I'm going to do. I have nothing left, so I want you to die." Lin Che's heart sank. She looked at Lin Che. Her eyes were darting around and there was a crazed expression on her face as she looked at Lin Che. Perhaps Lin Che did not care at all for things like the title of the top socialite. But these were very important to Lin Che. Lin Che said, "Lin Che, stop throwing a mad fit. You're a socialite, I'm not. I don't want to be one either. I only attended the WW banquet because of our bet because you wanted to compete with me. But I'm just an illegitimate daughter of the Lin family. I'm not a socialite, neither have I ever wanted to be one. I just want to lead a peaceful life." Lin Che was the one who had forced her to attend the WW banquet. But in the end, Lin Che was now angry at her because of this. She was being too unreasonable. Lin Che looked at Lin Che. "Precisely. You don't care at all, right? To you, a socialite is worth nothing, right? In your eyes, I'm worth nothing too, right? Do you look down on me because I'm so anxious over the mere title of the top socialite?" Lin Che did not say that she could not understand why being the top socialite was so important. Lin Che scoffed. "You know, from the time I could walk, I learned how to dance. From the time I could speak, I learned how to sing. From the time I could read, I learned how to play the piano. You know, for so many years, there's nothing that I haven't been able to do. I spent all of my time learning these things. Do you know how hard I've worked?" Lin Che froze. She knew that Lin Che was very impressive and was good at many things. Looking back on her past, Lin Che's expression was one of complete sorrow. "I'm the best at everything I do and as good as the professionals, whether it is in horse riding, archery, ballet, or ballroom dancing. Do you know how much time and effort I put into these things?" Lin Che stopped right in front of Lin Che and grabbed a fistful of her hair. Immediately, Lin Che felt extreme pain from having her hair pulled. Lu Chusha said, "You don't understand. What can a worthless slut like you know? But you managed to take everything that belongs to me away from me with your clever tricks. You've turned me into a laughingstock. Do you know how I've been getting by? Do you know what they've been saying about me behind my back? If you knew, you would understand why I took such great pains to bring you here. You're the person who has destroyed all my hard work thus far. I'll make you pay for it." Chapter 477. Someone has taken Madam away. She had put so much time into obtaining the title of top socialite. Lin Che finally understood why Lu Chusha hated her so much. At this point in time, she could not question why someone would work so hard for the title of the top socialite. She was not Lu Chusha and would not understand the weight that the title had in her heart. She could only look at Lu Chusha and hope for her to calm down. "You can still get the title back. Since you're so great at everything, the title will still be yours next year. So why are you going crazy now? Your life hasn't ended yet. All your hard work thus far won't be ruined by me. I just happened to steal the title this time." "That's enough. What do you know? I won't lose to anyone. The word, lose, doesn't exist in my dictionary." Lu Chusha pushed Lin Che directly onto the ground. Frightened, Yang Lingxin shouted, "Don't hit us, don't hit us. We're all women. Why must you do this? Can't we just talk it out?" Lu Chusha snickered and looked at Lin Che. "I really want to know what else you have that appeals to Gu Jingze other than your face. If not for Gu Jingze, you wouldn't amount to anything." Lin Che looked at Lu Chusha. "A person doesn't have to be capable and be the best at everything to attain happiness. Everyone has the right to be happy. Indeed, I'm not good at anything, but I can still be liked by someone." Lu Chusha shook her head and pulled Lin Che's collar. "No, apart from this face of yours, you can seduce men with your skills in the bedroom. Today, I'll destroy everything you have, one by one. Don't worry, Lin Che. You won't die. You'll go back alive, but you'll lose everything just like I did. When you go back to your daily life, then you'll understand the pain I've been through. You'll understand why." Lu Chusha was about to grab Lin Che again when a man suddenly walked in from behind her. "Miss Lu, your family called, look." Lu Chusha's eyes twitched. Her family had called. She harumphed and said to Lin Che, "I'll come again and have some fun with you later." After speaking, she walked out in large strides. As Lin Che watched Lu Chusha leave, she first let out the breath that she had been holding. After breathing out, she looked at Yang Lingxin whose face was full of fear. "Sorry, little Shin, it's my fault you are also here." "It's all right." Yang Lingxin looked outside fearfully. She clung to Lin Che and asked, "Sister Che, what exactly does she want to do? Will she kill us?" Lu Chusha was so wealthy that she could not have kidnapped them for ransom. Therefore, did that mean that she wanted to kill them? Lin Che said, "Little Shin, don't be scared. She won't kill us. She's just so angry that it's unbearable, so she wanted to torment me. It has nothing to do with you. Later, just keep quiet and she won't cause trouble for you." Lin Che leaned against the wall and involuntarily wondered if Gu Jingze knew that she had been brought here. He probably knew. After all, the Gu family's plainclothes bodyguards had been with her when she left. They must have already discovered Lin Che's absence. Just then, the people in front looked at Lin Che and Yang Lingxin. Lin Che's hands and legs hurt a little from being tied together. She saw that Yang Lingxin's hands and legs were also tied together. She thought to herself that Yang Lingxin was definitely in pain. Thus, she lifted her head and asked the men, "Can you please loosen the ropes? We don't have any thoughts of escaping at all. But being tied like this really hurts too much." Although it did not really matter to her, she was worried about implicating little Shin. She thought that since it was impossible for her to save Yang Lingxin now, she could still do everything she could to alleviate her pain. The men looked at the two of them. One of them looked Lin Che up and down. Then, he lowered his head and said, "Hey, she's actually very beautiful. I feel a little bad tying her up." The other men laughed out loud behind him. But when they looked at Lin Che, they too felt that she was very beautiful. Lin Che lowered her head and tried to move further away from him. However, the man said, "All right then. I'll loosen the ropes." Lin Che quickly raised her head. "Thank you, Thank you. She said, you don't have to think about me. Just help little Shin loosen her ropes. Hearing this, Yang Lingxin lifted her head and looked at Lin Che gratefully. However, that man looked at Yang Lingxin and scoffed. If you're talking about her, forget it. She's not as beautiful as you. I can't be bothered with her. Immediately, Yang Lingxin's expression turned into an awkward one. Lin Che looked at these people in resentment. They were too evil. How could they say such a thing? Lin Che said, let go. I don't need your help either. She scoffed and turned her head away. Yang Lingxin turned around only after a long time. She looked at Lin Che and said, Sister Che, forget it. It doesn't hurt. Lin Che said, it's all my fault. Sorry, little Shin. It's all right, Sister Che. I believe that President Gu is already thinking of ways to rescue us. Definitely. Definitely. Lin Che smiled and looked at Yang Lingxin. In the conference room, Qin Hao rushed over in a hurry and headed straight to Gu Jingze. Sir, Madam has gone missing. Gu Jingze froze. Thereafter, amidst the questioning gazes of the higher-ups in the room, Gu Jingze stood up directly and walked out without giving any explanation. Qin Hao turned around and smiled at them. The meeting will be dismissed for now. We won't be having a meeting anytime soon. Qin Hao caught up with Gu Jingze and said, the security guards informed me that they brought her out directly through the window. They let her down slowly from the 6th floor and then placed her into a car just like that. Gu Jing's complexion immediately darkened. Qin Hao did not dare to say another redundant word. He quickly said, I've already instructed people to look for her. I'll look for her myself, Gu Jingze said, his face pale. He immediately headed outside thereafter. Hey, sir, you can't go. It's too dangerous. Qin Hao quickly chased after him in fear. However, Gu Jingze had already swiftly jumped into a car. By the time Qin Hao ran out, the car had already driven off. Qin Hao swallowed a mouthful of exhaust from behind the car. He simply felt terrible. This time, the sky and the earth were going to turn upside down in B City. At B City's Central Transportation Office. When Gu Jingze kicked the door open and walked straight into the largest modern road detection office, everyone was shocked. What happened? Who's that? How dare he barge into the Central Transportation Office? While they were shouting, they saw a man who seemed as cold as ice. He stood there and looked straight ahead. Then, he pushed the people in front of him aside without hesitation and stood before the equipment. Everyone was momentarily astounded. Who the hell are you? Do you know where you are? The person who had been pushed aside shouted angrily. However, he was quickly pulled back by his colleagues who had entered behind him. Leave, quick, leave, this is Gu Jingze. Don't say another word, leave quickly. They ran away hurriedly and did not dare to even turn their heads back. Thereafter, the head of the transportation office rushed in with his head drenched in sweat. He looked at Gu Jingze who stood there as if there was no warmth in his entire body. Behind Gu Jingze, he wiped away his sweat while saying, Mr. Gu, what are you looking for? We've arranged for one of our technical staff to assist you. Look. Chapter 478. I'll find her even if I have to turn B City over. Gu Jingze merely stood there wordlessly and looked at the huge screen before him. That day, all the staff in the transportation office were rushing about because of the sudden arrival of the King of Hell. In the afternoon, they finally found out that the car that had taken Lin Che away was a white sedan belonging to an Indian gang. Gu Jingze immediately said, come, let's go. Behind him, Qin Hao said worriedly, Sir, we'll go and investigate. You stay here. Before Qin Hao could tell him to wait for the news, Gu Jingze had already walked out first. The people in the Indian gang were gathered in the garage. This was their base for external operations. There were only a few worn-out cars that served as signs. Those familiar with the place knew the notorious reputation of the people here. They knew that they were not good people, so they would all drive away once they saw the garage from afar. They did not dare to get close. On this day, the tranquility of the afternoon was abruptly broken by several cars. A row of cars was parked directly outside. The people inside heard the noise and knew that something was up. Instantly, they stopped idling around and stood up. Someone is here to stir up trouble. Bring all of your weapons. In no time, more than 10 of them picked up their knives and hatchets and ran out. They arrived outside only to see the Gu family's bodyguards standing there, each of them tall and burly. The leader of the gang stepped forward from the row of people and asked, "Why? Are you here to cause trouble? I'm telling you, none of us from the Red Tassel gang are afraid of death. If you're here to cause trouble, be careful not to lose your head." These people committed murder and arson and had no qualms committing all kinds of crimes. Their reputation outside was not good and they incited fear in so many people. It had been a long time since anyone had provoked them directly. Qin Hao looked at the people in front of him and took out a photo of a screenshot. "We're not trying to cause any trouble. We just want to ask you if this car belongs to you. If you hand over the car, we won't pursue the matter any further." The man did not even glance at the photo. "What car? We don't know. Stop looking for excuses to cause trouble." Qin Hao scoffed. "We're used to attempting diplomacy before violence. But if you don't cooperate." "So what if I don't cooperate?" The tall man lifted the chopper in his hand and brandished it. "Do you want to experience what it's like to have your neck and head separated from one another? Why are you wasting your breath on them?" The moment the man finished talking, a steely voice immediately followed like the sudden arrival of a chilly night. Then, the people in the car opened the doors and alighted. One of the members of the Indian gang moved swiftly as well. Sensing the situation, he instantly raised their weapons and was about to attack. Without caring about who he was up against, he attacked first. Unfortunately, the dark figure nimbly dodged the attack. The gang member was slightly surprised that he had not succeeded. He froze momentarily before quickly turning around to attack the opponent again. Just then, someone pointed a pitch-black muzzle of a gun at his head. The man froze completely. Then, he lifted his head and followed his line of sight from the ice-cold muzzle. His opponent was dressed in black from head to toe. His gaze was as sharp as a sword and as empty as an overcast day. "Now, can you tell me who owns that car? If one gives me money, I will avert a disaster for him. We have our principles." "In that case, I'm afraid I have to persuade you to change your principles for me now. I'll give you 3 seconds to consider it. Otherwise, my gun definitely won't stand on ceremony with you." Gu Jingze's completely cold expression made him sweat inside. Drops of cold sweat dripped down one by one. However, he heard Gu Jingze say, "Your 3 seconds are up." Then, he pulled the trigger. The man was shot in his thigh and he was so terrified that he immediately hugged his leg and shouted. He said, "Next time, it will be your other leg." Gu Jingze's voice hardened even more. I'll tell you it's Lu Chusha from the Lu family." Only then did Gu Jingze retract the gun. Qin Hao wiped away his cold sweat and looked at Gu Jingze. Gu Jingze turned around and went into the car. "Dispose of the people here." Dispose. Naturally, Qin Hao understood what that meant. Qin Hao looked at these people and thought to himself, the only reason for this was because you offended someone you should not have offended. It would have been alright if they harmed someone else. But they had harmed Madam. The next destination was the Lu residence. When Gu Jingze arrived at the Lu residence, the staff outside were shocked when they saw the spectacle. This was Lu Chusha's private residence. It was different from Lu Qinyu's residence. The moment the Gu family's subordinates went in, the Lu family's maids stopped them. "Our young miss isn't around. No one is allowed to enter. It's useless for you to tell us that your young miss is not around. We want to go in and look for her," Qin Hao said. "Humph, this residence belongs to the Lu family. Who dares to barge in?" one of the maids said arrogantly. Just then, at the back, Gu Jingze alighted from the car once again. He did not want to waste even a second. Looking at the person in front of him, he said resolutely, "Say what you just said again." The maid had not expected Gu Jingze to come personally. He trembled slightly for a moment but nevertheless, thought that ultimately, no one in C Nation had ever dared to challenge the Lu family. "Second young master, if you're looking for young miss, please inform our old master. You really can't enter this place. Please help us out a little. However, Gu Jingze interrupted him. Go in and start searching. I'll see if anyone dares to stop me from going where I want to go. The Gu family's bodyguards rushed in immediately upon receiving his command. The people at the door were terrified. Are you mad? This is the Lu residence. Qin Hao pulled them aside and sneered. Forget the Lu residence. Our sir is about to flip the entire B city upside down. The Lu residence is nothing. He really felt that Gu Jingze had gone mad. Everyone said that Gu Jingze was afraid of nothing. This time, he knew that it was true. While Gu Jingze was searching the entire B city, Lin Che looked at the person who had entered. She pursed her lips and asked, how long is Lu Chusha planning to keep us here? Can you tell her to come and resolve whatever issue she has with us? The man said, seriously. You should be thinking about lasting as long as you can. Why are you so eager for her to torture you? Lin Che said, trying to escape forever is useless. I just hope that we can resolve this quickly. Besides, this has nothing to do with Little Shin at all. You guys kidnapped the wrong person. Can't you let Little Shin off? He looked at Lin Che. You're in a difficult predicament yourself, yet you're still concerned about others. Lin Che said, she's still a child. She shouldn't be dragged down by me and suffering here with me. Do a good deed and just let her go, alright. The man was not some Buddha. It was impossible for him to let Little Shin go just because she said so. But attractive people did have a certain advantage. Because he found Lin Che attractive, he was receptive to her words. When he heard Lin Che say this, he really felt that Lin Che was a good person. She was so beautiful and kind-hearted to boot. Our words are not the law. That's enough. Eat up first. The most important thing is to fill your stomachs. He gestured for someone to bring some steamed buns over. But at this moment, the door was kicked open to reveal Lu Chusha. Chapter 479. If you like her so much, why don't I give her to you? When Lu Chusha came in, she immediately gripped Lin Che's hair. You slut. I still wanted to have some fun with you, but I didn't expect Gu Jingze to come looking for you so soon. Upon hearing Gu Jingze's name, Lin Che and Yang Lingxin perked up. Was Gu Jingze really on their tail? However, Lu Chusha continued, it's a pity that he hasn't found out our location yet. We can still take our time playing around with you. Lin Che looked at Lu Chusha. You can do whatever you want with me. But I hope that you can let Little Shin off. She's innocent. Yang Lingxin looked up at Lin Che. Sister Che, don't bother about me. I'm fine. However, Lin Che had already sat up and was trying her hardest to block Yang Lingxin from them. She looked at Lu Chusha and said, let's resolve this between ourselves. You can just do whatever you want to do. I'm not afraid of you. Lu Chusha scoffed and said to the people behind her, go and bring me a knife. I'll slash her face rotten first. But the men looked at each other before shifting their gazes to Lin Che's stubborn face. At this point in time, she was still in front of Yang Lingxin and had not budged an inch. For a moment, they were a little reluctant as they looked at Lu Chusha. Miss Lu, slashing her face seems a little too vicious. It's better to. Slashing such a beautiful face rotten would be a real waste. Shocked, Lu Chusha turned around to look at the men behind her. What are you doing? Are you standing up for her? Miss Lu, Lu Chusha genuinely had not imagined that this would happen. With a crazed smile on her face, she turned back to look at Lin Che. This is great, just great. Lin Che, I've underestimated you. You're truly fantastic, truly fantastic. It's only taken you such a short time to reduce these men to submission. Your ability to seduce men is really impressive. They can't even bear to slash your face. Lu Chusha closed in on Lin Che bit by bit. Lin Che replied, it's because most people have more of a conscience than you do. Ha 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 ha, they have a conscience. No, they're merely reluctant to part with this coquettish face of yours. Fine, in that case, we won't slash your face. Let's play another game instead. She turned to them and said, don't you like her? Great, since you like her, I'll give her to you. Do whatever you want. The men looked at one another again before looking at Lin Che. There was no way that they could attract a woman as beautiful as Lin Che. But it would indeed be a great honor if she became theirs. Lu Chusha said, she's none other than Gu Jingze's woman. Don't you want to get a taste of Gu Jingze's woman? Frightened, Yang Lingxin shrank back even further. Lu Chusha's eyes narrowed into a line. Drag that woman out and play with her as you like. Once you're done with her, do the same with Lin Che. Hearing this, Yang Lingxin was so terrified that she started screaming, "No, no! You can't do this to me. Why must you do this?" However, the men still followed Lu Chusha's command and dragged Yang Lingxin out first. Lin Che shouted, "No, don't do that to her. She's still a child. You can't do that." "A child? There's no way she's still a virgin, right?" Lu Chusha turned her head and said venomously, "What a bargain for you guys. That face of hers is quite pretty too. Take her out and enjoy your time with her." The men immediately became a little excited. They looked at Yang Lingxin and quickly dragged her out. Lin Che tried her hardest to get up. "The person you have a grudge against is me. So come at me. Why are you targeting a child? You?" Lu Chusha said viciously, "Ayo. Why, are you anxious to enjoy yourself too after seeing that lass leave to do the same? Don't worry, these men are all yours. In a while, they will take turns to serve you." Yang Lingxin's screams moved further and further away from the door. Lin Che was both anxious and painfully frightened. "Lu Chusha, as a woman yourself, how can you be so evil? Let little Shin off and I'll do anything you tell me to do." Lu Chusha scoffed and said to the man behind her, "Since you're here, I'll hand Lin Che over to you first. Weren't you reluctant to slash her face? In that case, do with her as you like." Lu Chusha sneered and looked at Lin Che. "Have as much fun as you like. I'll help you film a video and gift it to Gu Jingze for his enjoyment." When Lu Chusha finished speaking, she smiled menacingly and walked out directly afterward. Lin Che bit her lip as she watched the door close. The man stood there and smiled while looking at Lin Che. Then, he said, "Wow. I've never touched a woman as beautiful as you." Of course, Lin Che was frightened. She looked in front of her at the man who was coming closer and closer. She did not dare to imagine what would happen later and could only step backward. "You don't listen to Lu Chusha's nonsense, all right. She's doing this just to torture me. But there's no animosity between you and me. Furthermore, everyone has brothers and sisters. Think about it. If your loved ones encountered what I'm going through now, how sad would you be? I have a family too. If my family members knew that I was being tortured here, their hearts would definitely ache, right?" However, the man still continued to approach her. He looked at Lin Che, scratched his head, and said, "Don't worry. I'll be very gentle with you. I mean it. I'll just give it a try, give it a try." "No, no, the fact that you were willing to feed us shows that you're a good person. Don't be deceived by Lu Chusha, all right?" He did not really find it in his heart to do it. As he looked at Lin Che's beautiful face and the way she was gazing at him in fear and grief, his heart softened. To others, they had done everything from committing arson and murder to robbing people. But looking at this beautiful woman messed up his thoughts and really made him slightly reluctant. "Aiya, why was a young lady like you taken away by those rich men? How nice it would have been if you were my wife," he said before pouncing on her immediately. In no time, Lin Che was pushed to the ground. The fall instantly caused her to feel lightheaded. Facing the man nearby, she was quick-witted and immediately started crying. She looked at him with eyes that glistened with tears. You hurt me. It's so painful. This won't do. I fell on my head. Is it bleeding, boo-hoo?" The man's heart softened completely under her teary gaze. He hastily asked, "Did you hurt your head? Let me take a look." "That won't do." When he came closer, Lin Che immediately seized the chance to knee him in the face. In pain, the man clutched his face and fell onto the ground. Lin Che jumped up. However, it was only then that she realized that her legs were still tied together. She had barely managed to hop a few steps when the man behind her stood up. Unrelenting, he pounced on Lin Che again. Lin Che cursed her bad luck. Was she done for? If Gu Jingze knew that another man had touched her, would he still want her? No, even she would think herself unworthy of him. But at this exact moment. Chapter 480. How did Gu Jingze find this place so quickly? When the man pounced on her again, the door burst open. Startled, the man looked at the person who had entered. He was just about to pick up the weapon lying at the side when he was thrown aside all of a sudden. In her shock, Lin Che raised her head. When she saw the Gu family's bodyguards, she really felt as if she was looking at her loved ones. They had finally found her. Lin Che immediately sat up. Then, Gu Jingze appeared at the doorway like a god. He stood there firm and tall and was dressed in black from head to toe. But Lin Che still felt a sense of security wash over her instantly. A sense of security that was beyond words. She had never missed him as she did at the present moment. With one look, Gu Jingze spotted Lin Che on the ground. His eyes paused and flashed with a frenzied happiness. Then, he flew to Lin Che's side and lifted her in his arms. He gazed at Lin Che's face. Although barely a day had passed, it felt to him as if a century had passed. Lin Che, he clasped her hands and held her tightly in his arms. Lin Che inhaled the familiar scent of his chest. The scent of rosin made her feel at ease. At this moment, her previously high-strung heart finally relaxed. But she also felt incomparably tired. Gu Jingze, you're here. I thought that I would never see you again. Her eyes were nearly moist with tears. The next moment, Lin Che's head jerked up. Little Shin. Don't worry, I've already instructed people to go over, Gu Jingze consoled her. It was only upon hearing this that Lin Che let out the breath that she had been holding. At this moment, with one arm wrapped around her, Gu Jingze's eyes suddenly hardened. He stood up and narrowed his dark eyes threateningly at the man on the floor. The man immediately started trembling all over due to fear. Gu Jingze asked, which of his hands touched you? Lin Che said nothing. Right now, she did not want to look at the man at all. When she recalled what had happened earlier, she was still frightened and shivers were now starting to run through her body. However, with one arm wrapped around her body, Gu Jingze continued to look at the man on the floor. Then, he suddenly lifted his foot up, aimed it at the man's hand, and stepped on it. His leather shoes were crushing the man's hand, causing him to howl in pain. Then, in the next moment, Gu Jingze was holding an exquisitely crafted pistol in his hand. He aimed the pistol at the man's hand and shot it. Ah! The man cried out and curled up in agony. Gu Jingze snorted. Even though he was so angry that he wanted to rip the man apart, he nevertheless carried Lin Che in bridal style and headed out first. Deal with him, he said to his subordinates before swiftly walking out. The members of the Lu family soon discovered this incident. However, by this time, Gu Jingze had already taken Lu Chusha away. Lu Chusha did not think that Gu Jingze would find her so quickly. She had known a long time ago that Gu Jingze would definitely look for her. Furthermore, she had never thought that she could escape his pursuit. In the room, she shouted, Gu Jingze, so what if you caught me? Even if you dare to lay a finger on me, my father won't allow it to happen. You will still have to release me. Just then, members of the Lu family had already gathered in front of the room. This time, Lu Chusha had really caused a huge disaster. Just from the fact that Gu Jingze had turned the entire B city over in several hours and had caused great commotion just to find Lin Che, they knew that Lu Chusha was truly in trouble this time. Gu Jingze walked out of the room and saw Lu Baikan who had just arrived. I won't hand Lu Chusha over to you. Since she dared to do such a thing, she should know that I won't let her off easily. Lu Baikan looked at Gu Jingze. I know that this lass has committed a heinous crime this time. She deserves to be punished for what she has done to Lin Che. But ultimately, she's my sister. I can't stand by and pay her no heed. Tell me how you want to punish her. I hope that you can spare her life on account of the Lu family. Gu Jingze narrowed his eyes. She has provoked me countless times. On account of the Lu family and of the fact that she saved my life once before, I spared her. But this time, she actually dared to treat Lin Che this way. Lu Baikan responded, I know. I never thought that she would be so audacious. Lu Baikan knew that there was no basis for any confidence this time. Lu Chusha was too thoughtless. Did she think that the Lu family could still guarantee her life if she did this? If so, she had underestimated Gu Jingze and wrongly estimated his power. Lu Baikan said, fortunately when you arrived, you managed to save Lin Che. Spare Chusha's life on my account. My father is already so old and she's his only daughter. As long as she's still alive, he can be at ease. Gu Jingze drew in a deep breath. Fine, but she can forget about walking out of this place for the rest of her life. Lu Baikan froze. Gu Jingze sneered and pushed open the door to the room. Inside, Lu Chusha was tied up. When she saw Lu Baikan, she raised her head and cried out, "Older brother, you've come to save me. Quick, get me out of here. I've made a mistake but I won't ever do it again. Get me out of here." Lu Baikan looked at her and felt a little sad for her. But she had no one but herself to blame or daring to challenge Gu Jingze. Did she really think that Gu Jingze was some piously good man? Did she think that he would spare her just because she was a woman? Lu Baikan looked at Lu Chusha. "Chusha, you really caused a huge disaster this time. In the future, reflect on yourself properly. Don't worry about father. I'll look after him. You stay here and reform yourself." Lu Chusha looked at Lu Baikan in surprise. "Older brother, what do you mean?" Lu Baikan said, "I've already told Gu Jingze to spare your life on account of the Lu family, but you did, in fact, make a grave mistake." Lu Chusha widened her eyes in disbelief and looked at Lu Baikan fearfully. "No, no. I want to go out. Older brother, I'm the young miss of the Lu family. I'm your sister. He wouldn't dare to do anything to me." Lu Baikan cast a sideways glance at Gu Jingze, who was standing there with a completely indifferent expression. He shook his head dismally at Lu Chusha. "You're too naive. If you weren't my sister, do you think you would still be alive to see me now?" Lu Chusha looked at Gu Jingze in shock. He stood there upright with his back facing everyone. His back view was as terrifying as that of a god's. No, I don't want to be locked up here. I don't want to be taken away by Gu Jingze. Older brother, you have to save me. You have to save me. What's so terrifying about him? You can't leave me here." Indeed, Lu Chusha had not expected Gu Jingze to be so powerful. First of all, she had not thought that Gu Jingze would find her so quickly. Now, she did not think that Gu Jingze would really dare to punish her. Lu Baikan looked at Gu Jingze. "Tell me how you'll deal with her so that I can be mentally prepared." The silence was a deathly stillness in the air. Gu Jingze turned his head to say, "She will be locked up in the mental hospital on San Clemente Island in North America." Frightened, Lu Chusha struggled to free herself. No, I won't go to the mental hospital. I won't go. Gu Jingze, let go of me. There's no way you dare to treat me like this. I'm Lu Chusha, the young miss of the Lu family.